The morning started like any other Saturday in the small mountain town of Cedar Ridge. 8-year-old twin sisters Emma and Lily Mitchell begged their mother to let them explore the forest trails behind their house. Sarah Mitchell hesitated, watching the gray clouds gathering on the horizon, but the girls had been cooped up inside all week due to rain. "Please, Mom, we promised to stay on the main trail," Emma pleaded, her bright blue eyes sparkling with excitement. Lily nodded eagerly beside her sister, both girls practically bouncing on their toes. Sarah checked her watch. It was only 10 in the morning, and the weather forecast hadn't mentioned storms until evening. The twins were experienced hikers for their age, having grown up exploring these very trails with their father before his deployment overseas. They knew the basic rules: stay together, don't wander off the marked paths, and be back by lunch. "All right, but you take the walkie-talkies," Sarah said, pulling 2 small radios from the kitchen drawer. "Check in every 30 minutes, and if you see even one dark cloud, you come straight home." The girls grabbed their small backpacks already packed with water bottles and granola bars. Emma clipped the walkie-talkie to her belt, while Lily double-checked that they had their emergency whistle. They'd practiced safety procedures countless times with their parents. The twins set off through the back gate, their excited chatter echoing through the crisp mountain air. The trail they chose was familiar territory, a gentle loop that wound through towering pine trees and alongside a babbling creek. They'd walked it dozens of times before. For the first hour, everything went perfectly. The girls collected interesting rocks, spotted a family of deer, and built a small dam in the creek with fallen branches. Emma's voice crackled through the walkie-talkie right on schedule. "Mom, we're at the big fallen log. Everything's great." But as they ventured deeper into the forest, the sky began to change faster than anyone had predicted. What started as a few gray clouds quickly transformed into an ominous wall of darkness rolling over the mountain peaks. The temperature dropped suddenly and the wind picked up, sending leaves swirling around the girls' feet. Lily pointed toward the sky with growing concern. "Emma, look at those clouds. They weren't there a few minutes ago." Emma tried to radio their mother, but static filled the airwaves. The mountains often interfered with radio signals, but today seemed worse than usual. "Mom, can you hear us?" "We're heading back now," she called into the device, but only crackling sounds responded. The first fat raindrops began to fall as the twins hurried back along what they thought was the return path. But in their excitement to get home quickly, they took a wrong turn at a fork in the trail they'd never noticed before. The rain intensified rapidly, transforming from gentle drops to a steady downpour within minutes. The familiar landscape suddenly looked different in the dim light and driving rain. Trees that had seemed welcoming now loomed ominously overhead. The creek they'd been following grew louder and more turbulent, fed by the sudden deluge. Emma grabbed Lily's hand tightly. "Stay close. We just need to find the main trail again." But as they pressed forward, both girls realized with growing dread that nothing looked familiar anymore. They were lost. The storm unleashed its full fury without warning. What had been a gentle mountain shower transformed into a raging tempest that seemed to come from nowhere. Thunder crashed overhead like cannon fire, and lightning split the darkened sky in jagged white streaks that illuminated the forest in eerie, flickering moments. Emma and Lily huddled together under a large pine tree, their small bodies shivering as cold rain soaked through their jackets. The wind howled through the branches above them, sending pine needles and small debris flying through the air. What had started as an adventure was quickly becoming their worst nightmare. "I can't see the trail anymore," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm's roar. The rain was so heavy it felt like standing under a waterfall. Every direction looked the same, an endless maze of trees and undergrowth that offered no clue about which way led home. Emma tried the walkie-talkie again, pressing the button repeatedly and shouting into the device.
"Mom, Dad!"
"Anyone, can you hear us?" But the radio remained silent except for bursts of static. She didn't know that the storm had knocked out several communication towers in the area, making their calls impossible to receive. The creek they had been following earlier was now a rushing torrent, swollen far beyond its normal size. Brown water churned and foamed as it carried fallen branches and debris downstream. The peaceful, babbling brook had become a dangerous river that cut off several potential escape routes. As the afternoon wore on, the girls' situation grew more desperate. Their clothes were completely soaked, and despite their winter jackets, both were beginning to show signs of hypothermia. Lily's lips had turned blue, and Emma's hands shook uncontrollably as she tried to navigate with their small compass. They attempted to build shelter using fallen branches and their emergency blanket. But the wind was too strong. Every structure they tried to create was immediately torn apart by the fierce gusts. The forest that had always been their playground now felt hostile and unforgiving. Meanwhile, back home, Sarah Mitchell was growing frantic. The girls should have returned hours ago, and the unexpected storm had her heart racing with worry. She'd been trying to reach them on the radio every few minutes, but got no response. When her neighbor mentioned seeing the twins heading toward the old mining trail, a path they'd been specifically told to avoid, Sarah's concern turned to panic. She immediately called the local sheriff's department. Deputy Marcus Chen answered the phone and listened carefully as Sarah explained the situation. He'd been a search and rescue coordinator for 15 years and knew how quickly conditions could turn deadly in the mountains. "Ma'am, I'm dispatching a team immediately," he assured her. "We'll find your girls." But privately, Marcus knew the storm was making search efforts incredibly dangerous. Visibility was near zero, and the rough terrain was treacherous even in good weather. As darkness began to fall, Emma and Lily found a small overhang of rock that provided minimal shelter from the driving rain. They pressed close together, sharing their remaining granola bar and trying to stay warm. Emma wrapped her arms around her younger sister, trying to be brave even though fear was eating away at her confidence. "Mom and Dad will find us," Emma whispered, as much to convince herself as to comfort Lily. "They always said if we get lost, stay in one place and wait for help." But as the night deepened and the storm showed no signs of letting up, both girls began to wonder if anyone would be able to find them in time. The storm unleashed its full fury without warning. What had been a gentle mountain shower transformed into a raging tempest that seemed to come from nowhere. Thunder crashed overhead like cannon fire, and lightning split the darkened sky in jagged white streaks that illuminated the forest in eerie, flickering moments. Emma and Lily huddled together under a large pine tree, their small bodies shivering as cold rain soaked through their jackets. The wind howled through the branches above them, sending pine needles and small debris flying through the air. What had started as an adventure was quickly becoming their worst nightmare. "I can't see the trail anymore," Lily whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm's roar. The rain was so heavy it felt like standing under a waterfall. Every direction looked the same, an endless maze of trees and undergrowth that offered no clue about which way led home. Emma tried the walkie-talkie again, pressing the button repeatedly and shouting into the device. "Mom, Dad, anyone, can you hear us?" But the radio remained silent except for bursts of static. She didn't know that the storm had knocked out several communication towers in the area, making their calls impossible to receive. The creek they had been following earlier was now a rushing torrent, swollen far beyond its normal size. Brown water churned and foamed as it carried fallen branches and debris downstream. The peaceful babbling brook had become a dangerous river that cut off several potential escape routes. As the afternoon wore on, the girls' situation grew more desperate. Their clothes were completely soaked, and despite their winter jackets, both were beginning to show signs of hypothermia. Lily's lips had turned blue, and Emma's hands shook uncontrollably as she tried to navigate with their small compass. They attempted to build shelter using fallen branches and their emergency blanket, but the wind was too strong. Every structure they tried to create was immediately torn apart by the fierce gusts. The forest that had always been their playground now felt hostile and unforgiving. Meanwhile, back home, Sarah Mitchell was growing frantic. The girl should have returned hours ago, and the unexpected storm had her heart racing with worry. She'd been trying to reach them on the radio every few minutes but got no response. When her neighbor mentioned seeing the twins heading toward the old mining trail, a path they'd been specifically told to avoid, Sarah's concern turned to panic. She immediately called the local sheriff's department. Deputy Marcus Chen answered the phone and listened carefully as Sarah explained the situation. He'd been a search and rescue coordinator for 15 years and knew how quickly conditions could turn deadly in the mountains. "Ma'am, I'm dispatching a team immediately," he assured her. "We'll find your girls." But privately, Marcus knew the storm was making search efforts incredibly dangerous. Visibility was near zero, and the rough terrain was treacherous even in good weather. As darkness began to fall, Emma and Lily found a small overhang of rock that provided minimal shelter from the driving rain. They pressed close together, sharing their remaining granola bar and trying to stay warm. Emma wrapped her arms around her younger sister, trying to be brave even though fear was eating away at her confidence. "Mom and Dad will find us," Emma whispered, as much to convince herself as to comfort Lily. "They always said if we get lost, stay in one place and wait for help." But as the night deepened and the storm showed no signs of letting up, both girls began to wonder if anyone would be able to find them in time. Dawn was still hours away when Emma realized that Lily had stopped shivering. This terrified her more than anything else that had happened during their ordeal. She knew from her father's military training stories that when someone stopped shivering in the cold, it meant their body was shutting down. "Lily, wake up," Emma whispered urgently, shaking her sister gently. "You have to stay awake. Talk to me about something, anything." Lily's eyes fluttered open, but she seemed confused and disoriented. "I'm so tired, Emma. Can't I just sleep for a little while?" Her words were slurred, and her skin felt ice cold to the touch. Emma knew she had to do something drastic to keep her sister alive. She pulled off her own jacket and wrapped it around Lily, even though she was already freezing herself. Then she began doing jumping jacks and other exercises in the small space under the rock overhang, trying to generate body heat for both of them. "Come on, Lily, move with me. We have to keep our blood flowing," Emma insisted, pulling her sister to her feet. It took all her remaining strength to get Lily moving, but gradually her sister began to respond. The twins spent the next hour doing whatever exercises they could manage in their tiny shelter. Emma sang songs, told jokes, and even made up silly dances to keep Lily alert and active. It was exhausting work when they were already weak from cold and hunger, but Emma refused to let her sister give up. Meanwhile, Jake and Max had been tracking the scent trail for over 5 hours. The storm was finally beginning to weaken slightly, though rain continued to fall steadily. Max had led them far from the original search area, following a path that seemed to defy logic. They had crossed 2 swollen creeks, climbed over countless fallen trees, and navigated through dense undergrowth that tore at their clothes. Jake's GPS showed they were now nearly 4 miles from where the girls had been last seen, in an area that most people would never think to search. But Max was becoming more excited as they progressed. His tail wagged despite the miserable conditions, and he moved with increasing urgency. Jake had learned to read his partner's body language perfectly over the years, and everything about Max's behavior told him they were getting close to something important. "Find them, boy," Jake encouraged, his voice hoarse from calling the girls' names for hours. "I know you're onto something." Other search teams had been forced to take shelter as the storm reached its peak intensity, but Jake and Max pressed on. The K-9 officer knew that every minute counted in conditions like these. Children could survive remarkably harsh situations, but there were limits to what the human body could endure. As they crested a small hill, Max suddenly stopped and let out a sharp bark. It was different from his usual working sounds, more urgent and excited. Jake followed the dog's gaze and saw what had caught his attention. A small piece of bright yellow fabric caught on a bush about 50 yards ahead. Jake's heart raced as he recognized it as part of an emergency rain poncho, the kind that children often carried in their hiking gear. He radioed the command post immediately, though static made communication difficult. "Command, this is Jake. Max has found something. We're at GPS coordinates." He read off their position carefully, knowing this could be the breakthrough everyone was hoping for. Max was pulling harder now, practically dragging Jake toward a rocky outcropping ahead. The dog's excitement was unmistakable, and Jake could feel his own adrenaline surging. After hours of searching through the storm, they might actually have found the missing girls. As they approached the rocks, Jake could see a small opening underneath, just the kind of place 2 frightened children might take shelter. Max was whining now, a sound Jake had heard before when the dog was close to finding someone alive. "Emma, Lily," Jake called out as loudly as he could. "If you can hear me, make some noise." For a moment there was only the sound of wind and rain. Then faintly, Jake heard something that made his heart leap, the sound of a child's voice calling back through the storm. "Help, we're here. Please help us." Emma's voice cracked as she shouted toward the sound she'd heard. After so many hours of being alone in the storm, hearing another human voice felt like a miracle. She shook Lily more urgently. "Someone's coming." "They found us." Jake's flashlight beam cut through the darkness and rain as he approached the rocky shelter. Max was pulling so hard on his leash that Jake had to brace himself to keep from being dragged forward. When the light finally illuminated the small space under the rocks, Jake's heart clenched at what he saw. Two small figures huddled together, soaked to the bone and shivering violently. Emma had her arms wrapped protectively around Lily, who appeared barely conscious. Both girls looked pale and exhausted, their lips blue from the cold. But they were alive, and that was all that mattered right now. "Emma, Lily, I'm Officer Rodriguez. Your mom sent me to find you," Jake called out gently as he approached their shelter. He could see the relief flood across Emma's face, followed immediately by tears. "Is my mom okay? We tried to call her, but our radio stopped working," Emma said between chattering teeth. "Lily's really cold. She keeps falling asleep and I'm scared." Jake quickly assessed the situation. Both girls were showing signs of hypothermia, but they were alert enough to respond to questions, which was a good sign. He immediately radioed the command post with their location and requested a medical evacuation team. "Command, we found them. 2 conscious children with possible hypothermia at my current GPS location. Request immediate medical response," he reported, though static continued to interfere with the transmission. Max seemed to understand that his job was done. The German Shepherd sat patiently nearby, his tail wagging as he watched Jake work. The dog had tracked the girls across miles of difficult terrain in terrible conditions, never giving up even when the scent trail seemed impossible to follow. Jake pulled emergency blankets and a thermos of warm soup from his pack. "First things first, we need to get you girls warmed up," he said, wrapping the metallic blankets around both children. "Your mom is going to be so happy to hear you're safe." He helped Emma sit up properly and gave her small sips of the warm soup. The liquid seemed to revive her somewhat, and color began to return to her cheeks. Lily was more concerning. She was responsive but clearly in worse condition than her sister. "Emma, you did an amazing job taking care of your sister," Jake told her as he worked. "The exercises you were doing probably saved both your lives." The officer used his body heat to help warm the girls while they waited for the medical team. He told them stories about Max's other rescues to keep them distracted and alert. The dog seemed to sense that the children needed comfort and moved closer, allowing them to pet his thick fur. "How did you find us?" Emma asked weakly. "We were so far from the trail." Jake smiled and patted Max's head. "This guy has a nose like you wouldn't believe. He followed your scent for miles even through all this rain. Max never gives up when someone needs help." The wait for the medical team felt endless, but Jake kept the girls talking and as warm as possible. He used his radio to update the command post on their condition and to let Sarah Mitchell know her daughters were alive. Even through the static, he could hear the relief and joy in their mother's voice. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the storm clouds, Jake heard the sound he'd been waiting for, voices approaching through the forest. The medical evacuation team had finally reached them, carrying stretchers and advanced medical equipment. "They're here," Jake told the girls. "The paramedics are going to take good care of you now. Soon you'll be warm and dry and back with your mom." Emma managed a weak smile. "Thank you for finding us. And thank Max, too." She reached out to pet the dog one more time, and Max licked her hand gently in response. The nightmare was finally over, but the real work of recovery was just beginning. The medical evacuation was challenging even with professional rescue teams. The paramedics had to carry the girls on stretchers through the same treacherous terrain that Jake and Max had navigated in the darkness. Fallen trees blocked their path repeatedly, and the rain-soaked ground made every step dangerous. Emma remained conscious throughout the evacuation, but Lily drifted in and out of awareness. The paramedics worked efficiently to stabilize both girls, wrapping them in heated blankets and monitoring their vital signs constantly. Jake and Max led the way back through the forest, retracing the path they had taken to find the children. The storm was finally beginning to weaken as they reached the main trail, where an ambulance waited with its engine running. Sarah Mitchell stood nearby with tears streaming down her face, surrounded by the dozens of volunteers who had spent the night searching for her daughters. "Emma, Lily!" Sarah cried out as the stretchers approached. She ran alongside the paramedics as they loaded her children into the ambulance, her hands shaking as she touched their faces. "Mommy's here now. You're safe." The ride to the hospital was tense but hopeful. Emma was able to talk to her mother and answer questions from the medical team. Lily's condition was more serious. Her body temperature was dangerously low, and she needed immediate treatment for severe hypothermia. At Cedar Ridge Hospital, Dr. Angela Santos took charge of the girls' care. She had treated many cases of exposure and hypothermia in her 15 years as an emergency physician, but seeing children in this condition always affected her deeply. "They're going to be fine," Dr. Santos assured Sarah, as the medical team worked to gradually warm the girls' bodies. "Emma is in better shape than her sister, but both girls are strong. They survived something that would have been difficult for most adults. The rewarming process had to be done slowly and carefully. Too rapid a temperature change could be dangerous, so the medical team used specialized equipment to gradually bring the girls' body temperatures back to normal. Lily required more intensive treatment, including heated IV fluids and close monitoring in the intensive care unit." News of the rescue spread quickly through Cedar Ridge. The story of two young girls surviving a mountain storm and the K-9 team that tracked them through impossible conditions captured everyone's attention. Local news crews gathered at the hospital, though the family requested privacy during the recovery period. Jake Rodriguez became an instant local hero, though he insisted that Max deserved all the credit. "I just followed my partner," he told reporters. "Max did all the real work. That dog has a gift for finding people who need help." The German Shepherd seemed to understand all the attention he was receiving. Max sat proudly beside Jake during interviews, his tail wagging as people praised his tracking abilities. The police department received dozens of calls from people wanting to thank the K-9 team personally. Over the next few days, both girls showed steady improvement. Emma recovered quickly and was released after just 2 days in the hospital. She had suffered mild hypothermia and some minor cuts from hiking through the forest, but her determination to keep herself and her sister alive had prevented more serious complications. Lily's recovery took longer. The severe hypothermia had put significant stress on her young body, and doctors wanted to monitor her heart and other vital organs carefully. But by the end of the week, she was sitting up in bed, laughing at her sister's jokes and asking when she could go home. The twins' father was granted emergency leave from his military deployment and flew home immediately when he heard about the rescue. The family reunion at the hospital brought tears to the eyes of the nurses and doctors who had been caring for the girls. "I've never been so proud and so scared at the same time," their father said as he hugged both daughters carefully. "You girls showed incredible courage out there." Sarah Mitchell had hardly left the hospital since the rescue. She sat by her daughter's bedsides around the clock, still processing how close she had come to losing them. The experience had changed her perspective on many things, including how precious and fragile life could be. 3 weeks after the rescue, the Mitchell family organized a special ceremony to thank everyone who had participated in the search. The entire community gathered at the fire station where the operation had been coordinated. Emma and Lily, now fully recovered, stood with their parents as they addressed the crowd of volunteers. "We can never thank you enough for what you did for our family," Sarah Mitchell said, her voice strong but emotional. "You risked your own safety to search for our daughters in terrible conditions. We are forever grateful." The girls had prepared their own thank you speeches. Emma spoke first, her voice clear and confident despite her young age. "All of you showed us that we live in a community where people take care of each other. When we were scared and cold in the forest, we never gave up hope because we knew people like you were looking for us." Lily, still a bit shy from her ordeal, stepped forward next. "I want to especially thank Officer Rodriguez and Max. Max's nose saved our lives. And Officer Rodriguez never stopped looking for us even when the storm was really bad." The ceremony's highlight came when the mayor presented Jake Rodriguez and Max with the city's highest honor for public service. Max wore a special medal on his collar, and Jake received a plaque recognizing his dedication to the community. But the real reward was seeing the Mitchell family safe and healthy. Dr. Santos spoke about the medical aspects of the rescue, explaining how the girls' survival had depended on several factors coming together perfectly. Emma's decision to keep her sister moving and active probably saved Lily's life, and the fact that they found shelter when they did gave them the protection they needed to survive until help arrived. The incident led to several positive changes in Cedar Ridge's emergency preparedness. The city invested in better communication equipment that could function during severe weather. They also expanded their search and rescue training program and added 2 more K-9 teams to their emergency response capabilities. Jake Rodriguez found himself in high demand as a speaker at schools and community events. He used these opportunities to teach children about wilderness safety and the importance of being prepared when exploring outdoors. Max always accompanied him to these presentations, serving as both a demonstration of canine abilities and a furry ambassador for the police department. The Mitchell family's perspective on outdoor adventures changed significantly after the experience. They still loved hiking and exploring, but they invested in better emergency equipment and communication devices. Most importantly, they never again underestimated how quickly weather conditions could change in the mountains. Emma and Lily returned to school as minor celebrities among their classmates. Their story had been covered by news outlets across the state, and they received letters from children around the country who had been inspired by their survival story. The twins handled the attention well, but they were most happy to just return to normal life. The forest where they had been lost held no fear for the girls once they recovered. In fact, they were eager to return to hiking, though always with proper equipment and careful planning. Their parents were initially nervous about this, but Dr. Santos explained that facing their fears in a safe, controlled manner would help prevent lasting psychological effects from the trauma. 6 months later, Jake and Max led the Mitchell family on a hike to the exact spot where the girls had been found. It was a bright, clear day with perfect weather, completely different from the night of the rescue. The rock overhang that had sheltered them looked small and insignificant in the daylight. "It's hard to believe we spent the whole night here," Emma said, looking around the area with new eyes. "It seemed so much bigger when we were scared." Max sniffed around the rocks, his tail wagging as if he remembered the successful conclusion of that difficult night. Jake watched his partner with pride, knowing that the dog would be ready to perform the same kind of miracle again if needed. The story of the twin girls lost in the storm became a local legend, told and retold in Cedar Ridge for years to come. It reminded everyone in the community about the importance of helping neighbors in need and never giving up hope, even in the darkest circumstances. Most importantly, it demonstrated the incredible bond between a police officer and his faithful dog, and how that partnership could mean the difference between life and death for people in desperate need of help.